Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Foreword, the podcast series brought to you by ISS ESG, the responsible investment arm of Institutional Shareholder Services. I'm your host, Mara Souders. Today I'm joined by my colleagues Thomas Harding and Ronja Wöstheinrich. Thomas is the Associate Vice President and ESG Product Manager, Regulatory Solutions Lead, and Ronja serves as Senior Associate, ESG Methodology. Over the course of today's episode, Thomas and Ronja will walk us through the SFDR. What is it? What are the challenges associated with SFDR compliance? And how can ISS help investors meet the regulatory requirements? Thank you both so much for joining me today on the podcast. Ronja, could you start us off with a brief background on the SFDR?
Back in 2018, the European Commission presented its action plan on financing sustainable growth, with the aim of boosting the role that finance can play in achieving the European Union's environmental goals, most notably the Paris Agreement and also the EU Agenda for Sustainable Development. As part of this action plan, several regulatory initiatives were launched, one of them being the so-called Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, or short SFDR. Now, Tom, can you tell us a bit more what the SFDR is and why there's so much talk about it in the investment community right now?
Sure. So, the SFDR is an EU regulation which requires financial market participants to disclose information about policies implemented and actions taken regarding the integration and consideration of sustainability risks and adverse impacts into their investment decision-making process with a number of key aims. Firstly, to standardize the reporting of environmental, social, and governance metrics across financial market participants, minimizing subjectivity in interpretation and mitigating the risk of potential greenwashing. Secondly, it aims to increase transparency on sustainability for investors, enabling and encouraging them to finance green. And finally, to expedite the integration of climate and ESG risks into the broader financial system. It is a mandatory regulatory requirement that investors need to become acquainted with, implemented on a comply or explain basis at both the product and entity level. Right now, it is only disclosure and reporting based, with no performance threshold set as of yet, or definitions as to exactly what good or bad SFDR performance looks like. This may well change in the future. It is an EU regulation with a global impact and has a knock-on effect across the rest of the world, with examples as follows. Either a global financial market participant that distributes and markets product in the EU, or, for example, a global corporate looking to attract EU investment.
Thanks for that overview, Tom. Now, at ISS ESG, we have, of course, been following closely the regulatory developments both in the European Union and across the globe. And we are very supportive of the aim to accelerate the integration of ESG considerations into the investment process. At the same time, we notice that the new requirements also pose a lot of challenges, both for investors and also for ourselves. Tom, could you elaborate a little bit on what some of the challenges that are being associated with SFDR compliance are?
Yes, and there are a few that I'd like to highlight today, Ronja. So there remains a fair amount of confusion around the timing and the application of the SFDR requirements. Firstly, level 1 requirements of the regulation already apply and have done since the 10th of March this year. They require broad principle-based disclosures considering how sustainability risks and principal adverse impacts are considered within your investment process. And also reporting against principal adverse impact metrics, and the utilization of specific templates is not mandatory and required at this stage. Those level 2 requirements implemented through the regulatory technical standards only apply from 2022 onwards. These include reporting via those specific templates required from the 1st of January 22, as well as reporting against the Principal Adverse Impact indicators, which comes into play with a reference period from the start of 2022 and requiring reporting ahead of June 2023. There is also subjectivity in the assessments of funds and how the regulations are to be applied. Firstly, Article 6, which requires and carries with it the lowest level of requirements and obligations applicable across all financial products and portfolios. Then Article 8 products, which promote environmental or social characteristics. And finally, Article 9 products, which have the highest threshold of obligations as they contribute to achieving either an environmental or social objective, whilst also causing no significant harm to any other similar related objective. Finally, as always, one of the key challenges will be in the data. Firms will need to collect data from various sources and then map that data to a singular and robust data model internally. A lack of data availability compounds this problem. Some metrics are already well disclosed and currently available, whilst others are not and have much less coverage. Inconsistencies surrounding ESG reporting, where metrics need to be in a specific format, however, some of which are unfamiliar or not widespread practice. An example here being that all financial numbers must be published in euros, creating additional currency translation risk. Checks upon data quality and transparency will become common practice and will be vital for auditing purposes. We expect these to be of great interest to regulators as these obligations are rolled out over the next months and years.
Thanks, Tom, for laying this out for us. Now, moving on to one topic that I find particularly interesting about the SFDR is that it requires investors to look not only at the financial risks that stem from ESG topics, but it also requires investors to consider the adverse impacts which their investments may have on society or the environment. Now, this resonates very well with our understanding of how to look at ESG. At ISS ESG, we take into account both the question of what impact does an issuer have on global sustainability challenges, as well as the related question, what risks and opportunities do these sustainability challenges pose for the issuer? Now, against this backdrop, can you explain a bit more how ISS can help investors meet the regulatory requirements that come with SFDR?
Sure, Ronja. Let's split the answer to this question into two parts. And firstly, take a closer look at the way we are assisting clients to be compliant with the immediate Level 1 SFDR requirements. So all of our underlying ESG products here at ISS ESG consider both sustainability risks and adverse impacts, as you rightly highlighted, and so are well suited and perfectly set up to assist in the assessment of both financial and ESG impacts. They can be used in investment decision making, taking the above into consideration, as well as being leveraged to create specific Article 8 and Article 9 focused products. In support of this, we have launched a new area of our website featuring methodology disclosures for all our underlying solutions, allowing our clients to link and reference these within their disclosure efforts. Then, further down the line, specifically addressing the Level 2 obligations, we are launching a specific and dedicated SFDR Principal Adverse Impact solution at the end of April. A standalone data package which will facilitate the measuring and analysis of investee companies against the specific indicators and metrics set out within the regulatory criteria. This will also include automated portfolio analysis and reporting capabilities, which will be offered later in the year, directly in line with the template which stem directly from the regulatory requirements themselves.
Tom, I'm sure our listeners will be curious to hear more about this forthcoming data package on principal adverse impacts. Can you tell us a bit more about this? What will it include, and where do you get the information from?
Absolutely. So our solution will cover both corporate and sovereign and supranational indicators. For the corporate assets, we will cover all mandatory indicators except from the unadjusted gender pay gap, alongside 15 out of 34 additional optional indicators. For sovereign and supranational assets, we are covering both of the 2 mandatory indicators, as well as 6 out of 8 optional additional ones. We believe this provides a good basis for reporting and allows our clients flexibility and optionality in terms of the additional indicators that they choose from. Data collection conversations have already started, focusing on expanding the list of supported indicators and prioritizing the unadjusted gender pay gap indicator to ensure that all mandatory metrics are supported prior to year end, well in advance of any regulatory deadlines. We will launch with a global coverage of up to 25,000 companies and up to 190 countries. This varies dependent on the indicator, with certain data points focused upon specific sectors and industry segments, decided by those which are deemed to be most relevant or at risk. This solution draws on a broad variety of our underlying ESG datasets and solutions, consolidating them into one single data package that has been mapped directly to the regulatory criteria. The data is continuously assessed and updated, coming from various sources, including annual corporate and sustainability reports, as well as tens of thousands of traditional media and news sources globally. For more information on how we can support you with your SFDR compliance obligations, please feel free to get in touch with myself or a member of the team. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ronja and Thomas, for taking the time to discuss the SFDR requirements for investors, as well as ISS ESG's specific and dedicated SFDR Principal Adverse Impact solution, which is expected to launch next month. For the latest company news and insights from ISS ESG, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter @ISS ESG. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune in next time to ISS ESG Foreword.